Instant kill mechanics are a staple feature of the turn-based RPG game genre, and typically see situational niche uses on account of their unreliable natures. Pokemon, being a turn-based RPG game, is no different, although they call them one-hit KO moves instead, presumably because kill isn't a very family-friendly word. Within competitive play, these moves were always dismissed as rarely seen gimmicks, not worth any serious consideration. But in Scarlet and Violet's VGC scene, they started seeing popular use thanks to Pokemon such as Stinglu and Articuno, and have prompted much discussion from competitive players. Some players even go so far as to declare these moves to be unhealthy for the overall game meta.
If you want to use fissure, you listen to me right now. It depends on what kind of person you are. Are you somebody who says, I want to win the game because I'm lucky, or because I'm the best fissure player? Or do you want to leave your fate up to chance?
People tend to associate instant kills with chance-based RNG, but there's actually a few different ways they are implemented, each of which can prompt meaningful gameplay decisions from the player. Since instant kills are a deceptively interesting to balance game mechanic, I figured it'd be fun to discuss this feature in general, look at 3 different ways some other games implement and balance them, and see why they are so awkwardly controversial for the competitive Pokemon scene. Firstly, definitions. Instant kills do exactly what it says on the tin. Instantly kill the target upon a successful activation. But there's a bit of nuance to that description. Certain actions and skills might be able to one-shot an opponent by using a powerful attack to deal loads of damage, but these are hypothetically survivable when assuming the user and target had either insufficient offense or sufficient health and defenses respectively. Instant kills bypass their game's damage calculation entirely. Regardless of the user's attack and target's defensive stats, successfully landing an instant kill immediately defeats the target. Even if the user had 0 attack and the target had infinite health, they are completely impossible to tank via conventional defenses alone. The only way to survive a successful instant kill is via special defensive effects such as invincibility, which would completely block the hit from activating, or endure style effects, which allow you to survive lethal damage with 1 HP. But depending on the game, instant kills might potentially bypass these regardless. To put things simply, get hit while unprotected and it is straight to the Shadow Realm for you, Jimbo. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. In terms of game mechanics, they aren't essential to any game. In fact, they are more so a luxury rather than anything necessary. Players can pretty much achieve the same results using regular attacks and high stats and damage numbers. However, game designers still bother to implement these for 2 main reasons. The first being player satisfaction. From the player's standpoint, the experience of immediately defeating an opponent in 1 hit is inherently satisfying due to the sense of sheer power it conveys, especially if said instant kill came in clutch to save you from an otherwise unwinnable situation. Some games even have additional feedback in the form of special audio or messages which play upon a successful kill, which can further increase the level of satisfaction received. In the end, it's all about that dopamine, baby. However, said dopamine experience is ultimately only temporary. It might feel highly empowering at the start, but if you give the player the ability to consistently one-shot everything, you very quickly end up in a situation where nothing challenges the player and they start to feel bored. The dopamine rush will fade as the player gets used to the game's new pacing. So, to both maintain a proper degree of challenge within the game and a level of satisfaction from successfully landing instant kills, game designers meddle with the consistently part of that sentence. To counterbalance the overwhelming power of a guaranteed kill, games will restrict them in ways such as having a low success chance or requiring certain specific conditions to be met. And that forms the foundation of the second reason why developers even bother to deal with such a feature in the first place: risk versus reward. By making instant kills have a chance and/or consequence for failure, designers turn them from the most overpowered option in the player's arsenal into a meaningful player decision about when, where, and how they should make use of it. As I mentioned before at the start of the video, there are 3 different restrictions games implement to balance out this extreme power: chance, conditions, and cost. Pokemon, amusingly enough, also features all 3 types. Chance-based instant kills are the most common variant, and they tend to be what people associate most with the mechanic in general. These types of instant kills have their success or failure be dependent on random chance. When handled well, RNG RNG and chance can make for fun gameplay mechanics because they introduce an element of variance, uncertainty, and chaos which can spice up what would otherwise be stale and predictable outcomes. After all, games like Mario Kart and Smash Bros. Wouldn't be as fun without the randomness of items thrown into the mix. However, there is some nuance with determining what this instant kill chance is, and it is rarely ever a fixed static value. In many games, this success chance is something that can be controlled and manipulated by the player or vary depending on the enemy. Different spells and skills can have different success chances or can either hit a single target or multiple targets. Players can obtain and equip passive skills or equipment which can raise the success chance, and different enemies can have different data values which determine how likely they are to get instant killed if a move is used against them, with some even outright having a 0% or 100% death chance. Depending on the enemy, skills, and player character in question, it is entirely possible to craft builds around making instant kills as consistent and reliable as possible, which can make for a mentally fun gameplay experience. All of these variables turn an unreliable RNG-based mechanic into a semi-viable player strategy in the right circumstances. Compared to the above, Pokemon's chance-based instant kills are more simplistic. They have a base accuracy of 30% that increases based on the level difference and fail if the user is a lower level than the target. They get the job done well enough for an in-game playthrough. For example, they'd be useful for Pokemon with high levels but low damage output, like a Fissure Onyx or something. However, the biggest limitation of such systems is that they only work against AI enemies. Combat systems where players can customize builds to manipulate probability are fun, but they allow for potentially game-breaking consequences which can feel quite unpleasant for a human player to be on the receiving end of. That is ultimately the reason why Pokemon's probability-based one-hit KO moves are so disliked by competitive players.
One-hit KO moves are some of the most rage-inducing attacks ever created. If you want to use Fissure, I don't like it, I don't respect it.
It isn't because they are inherently overpowered or used by overpowered Pokemon, although to be fair, Ting Lu's sheer defensive bulk doesn't do it any favors. It's simply because RNG mechanics are naturally disliked by competitive players in general. To put things bluntly, competitive PvP players do not appreciate elements of variance, uncertainty, and chaos. And this isn't something exclusive to Pokemon. I'm talking about competitive games in general. Competitive players want predictable, stable, and consistent outcomes to ensure that player skill becomes the only factor in determining victory. It's why competitive Smash players always turn off the fun stuff like stage hazards, items, and play on stages with standardized layouts. It's all in the name of removing and minimizing RNG as a factor as much as possible, just as it is with other competitive games such as Street Fighter. Yes, it might feel boring and stale, but it is also predictable and controlled, and guarantees that a player wins due to skill and not luck. The only times exceptions are made is if luck is literally baked into the game's core mechanics, such as with card games like Hearthstone, or if a character naturally has randomness as part of their moveset, such as False's random item mechanic from Guilty Gear. To put this into perspective, imagine you are playing competitive pro chess. Now imagine that every single time you move your knight, it has a 10% chance to kill one random enemy piece within a 1-tile radius of its ending position. Yes, that might be funny, but you can see why pro players may not like it. In practice, the reason why Ting Lu is problematic with its one-hit KO Fissure is simply because it's really bulky, giving it multiple chances to proverbially roll the dice. Gambling on a 30% chance to immediately win a fight is undeniably fun and entertaining for a regular player to both experience and watch. I myself love seeing silly RNG in games, but the potential for it to steal what is perceived to be an undeserved win is a massive turnoff to any sort of competitive PvP scene. In serious competitive environments, losing due to random chance will generate so much angry gamer salt you could preserve beef jerky with it.
Bro, if I fucking die.
This game sucks!
This game is garbage!
Although considering the infamous hygiene habits of certain competitive gamers, I cannot guarantee that beef jerky will be safe for consumption. To really make instant kills work in a competitively healthy fashion, they need to be designed to not only be purely dependent on probability alone. Condition-based instant kills are always guaranteed to kill their target, but only if a given condition is met. As long as that condition is not met, then the instant kill action is basically harmless. Conditions are typically used when a game designer aims to implement an instant kill mechanic which can be used against a living player, as these completely remove probability and RNG from the equation. The activation condition may be complicated, such as the Final Fantasy series' Doom status applying a counter that kills upon reaching 0 and decreases based on different factors. Or it might be extremely simple, like in Team Fortress 2, where the spy's knife instantly kills if he stabs somebody in their back hitbox. From a player's perspective, the instant kill feels more fair to play around because these are dependent on fixed and defined conditions, meaning it is possible for a human player to engage in counterplay and avoid the instant kill. Essentially, these change dying to an instant kill from a luck issue into a skill issue. With regards to game design, these are also more definite to balance because the condition itself can be quantified by numerical parameters and metrics, which can thus be meaningfully changed. If the condition is hit the target with a projectile, then the attack speed, projectile speed, or hitbox can be adjusted. If it is accumulate X counts of buff or debuff, the requirement can be adjusted. If it is after enough time has passed, the duration can be adjusted. Changes like these will have far greater impact on gameplay and players compared to balancing via simply adjusting probability. However, this style of implementation also has fundamental flaws and limitations. Because the end result of instant kills are powerful at worst and game-winning at best, entire games can potentially be warped around their existence and rules. A player can viably ignore all other standard game actions in favor of intentionally going out of the way to fulfill and play around the instant kill condition. When this happens, it makes for a somewhat non-interactive and unfun experience because the game has now derailed into both players trying to activate or prevent the instant kill's activation. For a quick example, there's Yu-Gi-Oh's Exodia. The gimmick of these cards is that getting all 5 Exodia cards in your hand immediately wins the game and defeats the opponent. So Exodia players basically spend all of their time drawing cards non-stop, leaving the opponent with no possible counterplay except to rush the player down before enough cards get drawn. Pokemon itself also has 2 conditional instant kill moves, Perish Song and Destiny Bond. Of the 2, Perish Song is the more interesting one and the one we will examine here. Perish Song causes all Pokemon on the field to faint within 3 turns. That's the instant kill condition. This can be easily avoided by switching before the 3 turns end. A popular strategy is to combo it with Mean Look or Arena Trap, which prevents opponents from switching. The cost is that this combo requires either 2 actions or 2 different Pokemon to set up and is counterable by stopping Perish Song from being cast or by defeating the Trapper within the time limit, giving opponents opportunity to disrupt the instant kill combo. This combo has a quantifiable condition and cost to activate, a viable counterplay option, and meaningful payoff. And most importantly of all, is stable, predictable, and purely player controlled with no RNG at all. Perish Song and Mean Look were a well-designed instant kill combination, and for many years, this strategy carved a niche and saw decent situational use here or there, until Mega Gengar came into existence, which possessed both Perish Song via egg moves and Arena Trap for its Mega Evolution ability. Mega Gengar users would just simply set up Perish Song, then spend all their time stalling with Protect and Substitute, generally refusing to interact with the opponent whatsoever. They were unbelievably unfun to battle against. And the problem with this lay with the third restriction, cost and resources. Cost and resources are the third restriction employed for balancing instant kills. Using these instant kills entail a substantial cost. They may cost a substantial amount of resources, place the user at substantial risk for using them, or the instant kill itself may have a limited number of uses across the entire game. The key word to all of this is is substantial. That means the cost to using them must have serious long-term consequences, and players shouldn't just be throwing them around willy-nilly. Players shouldn't be viewing these as disposable or simply just expensive to grind for. If we want a specific example of this, it'd be the Master Ball, which is a guaranteed victory against any wild Pokemon battle, but you only ever get 1 or 2 in the entire game. In comparison, Legend of Zelda's Breath of the Wild's Ancient Arrows are not bound as strictly by this restriction, since they can still be crafted, albeit using rare and expensive materials, and they require you to go through a lengthy side quest to unlock them. Resource cost is rarely used as the sole balancing restriction for instant kills. Not every game is compatible with or even wants to implement resource management mechanics into their games. However, it is often combined with chance or conditional restrictions in a different way, being used in the form of opportunity cost. In turn-based RPG games, your turns and actions are a resource in and of themselves, one which both the player and opponent sides equally get. Choosing to spend a turn on using your instant kill move means you are paying an opportunity cost of using that turn on a more consistent attack or doing something else. If the instant kill succeeds, the cost was worth it, but if the kill failed, then you wasted a valuable turn for nothing while your opponent still kept theirs, putting you behind in the game. In a way, this makes resource cost the most important balancing factor in designing instant kill moves. In games like Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, the player gets 4 characters and actions per round, and the protagonist can swap between multiple personas freely, meaning that the cost of using Hama and Mudo is low. However, in Pokemon, the player only gets 1 or 2 actions per round, depending on whether it's singles or doubles, and each Pokemon can only have 4 moves and thus sacrifices a lot to run a one-hit KO move, meaning the cost to pay to use the one-hit KO move is much higher. This is what made Mega Gengar so obnoxiously effective. It having both Perish Song and Arena Trap meant that the instant kill combo's cost was reduced from 2 actions to 1, and a partner was no longer required. The only cost was your Mega Stone. In other words, the instant kill became cheap to use, highly consistent, and its condition was easily met by using basic universal defensive moves. At that point, why even bother trying to play the game normally? This is also kinda the reason why Destiny Bond Mega Banette was never all that popular, despite it also having pretty good consistency. Destiny Bond instantly kills the opponent, which lands a killing blow on the user, meaning the cost is the user's own life on top of the turn taken to use it, which is a fairly steep price. Perish Trap Mega Gengar represents the other way instant kills can be poorly designed. It had 0 RNG involved, and there is theoretical skill-based counterplay, but when an instant kill becomes too cheap, reliable, and consistent, the amount of skill demanded to counter it becomes unreasonable and imbalanced relative to the cost to use it. The entire game meta became unfun for both casual and competitive players alike, because everyone was forced to play around Gengar's instant kill instead of playing the game normally. So with all these issues in mind, is there any way to actually make instant kills both fun to use for average players while also being healthy for competitive players? Well, yes there is, and here's 2 examples, neither of which are Pokemon. Dragon Quest features 2 traditional chance-based instant kill spells, Whack and Thwack. When the series' hero was added into Smash Bros. Ultimate, they brought these spells with them as special projectiles. Hero's gimmick is their spell system. Down B opens a menu containing 4 randomly selected spells drawn from a pool of spells. These spells all cost a resource called MP, which charges from attacking enemies with your regular attacks. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that Whack and Thwack are balanced around using all of the 3 restrictions we mentioned above. Firstly, Whack and Thwack have a RNG chance of success, but these spells appearing within the menu is also chance-based. As Smash is a platform fighter, there is the obvious condition of needing to hit a moving opponent with a relatively slow projectile. Casting spells also costs MP, which all of Hero's special moves rely upon, including his recovery move, meaning there is meaningful resource cost to casting Whack and Thwack. And of course, there is the obvious risk of standing still in a fast-paced movement game just to read the menu. Unless you are a mad lad and try to top deck it. Embrace the big Gamba life, baby! Any spell could be a chance to instantly kill the target or instantly kill yourself. Always bet on hero. The end result is that heroes' instant kills end up being mostly balanced for both casual and competitive Smash. They have a reasonable risk and cost for using them, they might not even show up, and there is the obvious counterplay of simply dodging the slow projectile. And even when they do land, their success chance is based on both the user and target's respective damage percentages, meaning they are intentionally designed to either kill a target who would have gotten KO'd by a regular move anyway, or as a desperation move from a user who was already at high percentage themselves. In practice, heroes' instant kills are acceptable because they have reasonable cost, chances, counterplay, and a player only has themselves to blame for getting hit by it. That being said, it's always possible to thwack someone at 0%, and it'll always be funny. Having some semblance of comedic value can do wonders to lessen the salt and tilt player perception in the mechanic's favor. Team Fortress 2's Spy is a fantastic demonstration of this. Spy is one of the 9 playable characters in the game, not counting special boss Saxton Hill, and Spy's gimmick is instantly killing any target he backstabs with his melee weapon. Unusually for a shooter, his gameplay is more about stealth than shooting, and he has many tools like invisibility watches and disguises to help him get into backstab positions. Spy's backstab is reasonably well balanced because it is conditional, and using it involves significant cost and risk. Every player has an obvious counterplay option of just turning around, meaning that in most situations, if you do get stabbed, it's largely your own fault for being distracted or unobservant. The Spy player also bears the risk of having average speed, the lowest health, and the weakest weapons out of all characters, meaning he needs to sneak in close to his targets while being extremely easy to kill. And the Spy's team bears the opportunity cost of a player choosing to play Spy instead of a conventional combat class like Soldier or Heavy, because the Spy's overall weakness means he is terrible at playing objectives like capturing points or pushing payload cards. A team with too many spies accomplishes nothing except make the enemy team comically paranoid, because too few players are left to do any of the heavy lifting. And just like Hero's thwack, Spy's backstab is inherently funny. Spy adds a lot to the overall comedy of the game, and there will never be any shortage of ridiculously dressed spies spouting funny insults and one-liners. It makes it generally hard to stay upset with the game for extended periods of time. So where does that leave us? I mean, we've covered a lot, but is there any conclusion to be drawn on this topic? Well, we've explained the reasons why players enjoy and why competitive environments dislike instant kills, which have nothing to do with the mechanics themselves, but due to chance. We've covered the 3 types of restrictions which instant kills are balanced around, being chance, conditions, and cost. And we've gone over examples of what happens when instant kill mechanics are poorly balanced, and cases where instant kill mechanics are well balanced, and saw how players reacted to them accordingly. Ultimately, instant kills need to be created with restrictions in mind because they are simply too powerful to be used freely. If their costs are too low, chances are too high, or conditions are too lenient, an instant kill mechanic can get out of control and negatively impact a player's metagame experience, which is why they are always so awkward for Pokemon. Instant kills are at their best when they are made with good niches and situational uses to excel in. Never useless, but also never the best option. They are such a tricky mechanic to balance, but if done right, also a fun mechanic for a player to mess around with. Is it all necessarily worth it in the end? Well, that's hard to say. The balance could go right, or it could go horribly wrong. It all really depends on the game, the players, and the implementation. Although I guess the same could be said for just about every mechanic that a designer adds into a game. Even with my own humble knowledge of game design, it'd be pretty unfair to claim or declare any sort of non-subjective and fair judgment on this subject. I'm only here to share my perspective about the game design considerations that go into such mechanics, not to dictate or influence how you should feel about them. After all, every player has their own opinions and experiences regarding the subject of instant kills, all of whom are perfectly valid. So, let me ask you this, my dear viewer. What are your own opinions about the subject of instant kills? And what kind of experiences led you to arrive at this opinion?